into this. So let's just recap for just a quick second here and realize that there's another person that has now entered the picture here called Shakuni, and the Shakuni type is a fake Brahmin. Now, a little backstory on Shakuni, which I think is necessary, is for us to understand like what the setting of the world looks like during this time. Now, because the environments are changing everything, we've come down from the mountains, we're now into the forest, trade has began. And because trade becomes so instrumental to how, first of all, trade only begins when someone has something that you don't. Let's just be clear here. So in the first yugas, there was no trade because everyone shared the same thing. There was plenty of abundance. So there was other things to really be drilling into beside how am I going to get some beads from Nova Scotia and some necklaces of amber from wherever. Okay, so but after a while, as we hear about the Silk Road and those kind of operations, we know that this entire area that we were looking at on the map earlier, which is here, actually was one of the largest trade routes in the history of humanity. And that the trade between all these nations, the central place is actually in this area. Now, if you think about this gives us a little bit more credibility. I didn't actually think about this until just now. You see how this entire country borders the ocean? This is the perfect setup for trade. They say even like Easter Island or whatever had a name that meant the island, basically an island surrounded by water that you could board. So because everybody traveled around in ships, there was no cars. So if you see the geological position of this particular landmass, you can definitely see that there's trade access all around. There's trade with Africa. There's trade with all these different countries that you see in this nucleus. Okay. And because of that, you have people coming from other countries, including Shakuni, who are seeing the wealth of this empire, which gives us names like Candy. Candy, of course, I believe personally was named after when you put your hands in the river, because they said that's how it would be. You put your hands in the river, you pull up a bunch of rocks. You got sapphires, you got emeralds, you got all these different precious metals, and it looks like candy, hence the term Candy. Even one of the most powerful families was the Cola family, spelled different, but probably gives us Coca-Cola today, as this nation is continuously plundered for all of its wealth, its linguistic wealth in history, its sciences, its people. Every single thing you can think of has been despoiled in this empire and brought to us today by another group of people as if it's theirs. So again, just to center around that this particular area is also a strong trade route, then enters Shakuni. And we talk about what is a Shakuni type. And that's here. So this is important because we have to realize that, let's say, for instance, if you have your stuff together, everything's working, your nation's strong, you may get some coming in envying that. Some feeling like Shakuni type, insecure, feels others have something they don't, and they will do whatever to get it. Shakuni type uses the dark arts such as cunning, lying, cheating, gambling, and prostitution to supplant and get what they feel like they want but does not belong to them. A Shakuni type uses one's customs to gain a foothold on them. The Shakuni type will use marriage, contracts, religion, and tribal beliefs to manipulate. And the reason for this is, remember, even to this very day, if you go to indigenous tribes, some of the superstitions they have are pretty far out. But they believe it, and they believe the essence of it. And nobody is there to say if this is going to be right or wrong. So we're not into trying to judge that today. What we're trying to highlight is that if a Shakuni type comes into that area and sees that the belief of the people is if you wake up with your face blue, then you're the leader, Shakuni would figure out how to make his face blue. Now, instead of such a, let's say, loose examples, let's look at some of the real examples, which we actually find several accounts of that I wasn't able to detail all of them, but we'll go through them real fast in the Bible. So Abraham, who we know now is the fake Brahmin, offers to the Nasut Bitti, who we know was the Kemetan Pharaoh. Nasut Bitti means Pharaoh, but Pharaoh is a later word that came on. So Nasut Bitti was the original pharaohs, the leaders of Kemet. So what is being talked about here is actually symbolic. It doesn't even have to be an actual physical event that took place, but the Brahmin, who's the fake Brahmin, offers Pharaoh will say in the text that everybody knows, his wife, Sarah. Now we know now where all these terms come from, but let's be the flies on the wall and read what's happening here. So during this process in the Bible, after this occurs, Pharaoh has this dream and it's horrible. He's basically been cursed somehow. And he realizes in this dream that this is connected to this woman that he just married. So he goes back to Abraham and he says, hey man, is this your wife or something? And then, of course, Abraham says, yeah, it is. And he said, man, what kind of shit is this? Why would you give me your wife to sleep with? And then he goes, well, because, and this is according to their own accounts, because if I didn't give you my wife, I would assume that you would kill me. And then the Pharaoh says, why would you even think something like that? We showed you nothing that will give you the idea that we would kill you. Now, all this is symbolic. Okay. So what's happening here? So that's one tense. They're just showing you that cunningness with wives. Now, it was known that Shakuni actually brought a woman in that was from Russia, which we're recognizing today as Russia. And because this woman was so beautiful, he was capable of getting her married into one of the Raj families. And that's how he gained a foothold in this area, to the point where Shakuni actually has a temple in India right now. Okay, so these are real people. This is real things that happen. These are not metaphor. This is not mythology, and this is not always a metaphor. But notice how that's why mythology started, is because you get these real stories mixed in with fake stories, and it's just confusion. Let us go down and confuse them. You see, so this is also what we have to pick through some of the times. It's like slim pickings. For the last 10 years, I've been trying to pull apart all of these different aspects of things, and also going through the emotional response of experiencing these atrocities. So to narrow it in, we also have another situation where Jacob's mother is literally written about in supplanting Esau's birthright, which is known to be the war between the Israelites and the Jews, or the Israelites and the Arabs, which is another fake war, a false flag. But that the birthright was stolen by tricking the blind husband into believing that he was blessing the other. Now, what is this, is what I'm saying. How can this be called holy? One more example, Solomon trips Belkis, who's the queen of ancient Lanka. That's why a lot of people don't really recognize, they just call her the Queen of Sheba. Where's Sheba at? Because her name is not Sheba. Her name is Belkis. Where is she from? Belkis means the god of kiss. Okay, what is kiss? That's another story. But Belkis was a warrior queen from ancient Lanka that Solomon, again, this is metaphors, Solomon tricked her into sleeping with him. And the story goes that Solomon thought that, well, he did a couple things. He thought that he had heard that she had a hoof foot, so he built like a glass floor so he could see under her dress. Also, he told her that if she took anything from his kingdom, that she would have to sleep with him. But she was like, I don't need to take anything from you because I have everything. This is actually where the root to the word Sarah comes from. It means actually a woman that doesn't need a husband or an owner. So she says, I already have everything. And then Solomon proceeds with a trick where he serves all night this really hot, spicy food. And toward the middle of the night, Belkis is kind of like, yo, I need some water. And she goes in and gets some water and she drinks it. And then Solomon grabs her and says, oh, you took something from me. Now you must sleep with me. So this kind of behavior is a Shakuni type. And this is why Solomon and David and these kings in this particular scripture actually connect to the Shakuni character in mythologies. Does that make any more sense about Shakuni and just how he gets down in the ancient setting and causes this different troubles and confusions amongst these tribes?
Well, I'm hearing a very confused consciousness in the Shakuni type. Okay. And I'm also seeing, the tricks of a Shakuni type, the ways to sow seeds of confusion, and really to disconnect that could be whole and unified. I'm curious, what does the DNA of a Shakuni type? What's in that? What's
What
that
happens?
look like?
What happens with the DNA when you get involved in Sagunism? Because I think that what everybody needs to realize in this conversation is that we're using all of this as archetypes now. We're not trying to find the specific person so we can go to their grave and spit on it or whatever. This has happened thousands of years ago. There's nobody to blame. But what we want to recognize is we want to recognize the Saguni in ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of always trying to throw arrows at something, right? We want to see, how does that exist in me? So the Saguni is often the selfish person. The Saguni is jealousy, greed, hatred, things that we know by common sense are not going to propel us. But when we act and we do that, let's say a lot of people think they get away with that, which segments us into the DNA. See, now when people act in hatred, they think that while I'm getting away with it, I'm being rich, I'm becoming rich. This is the idea of the Saguni types now. They feel like, well, we're controlling the entire world. But there is a big thing that's happening that is out of the view of their own ignorance. Because remember, because they're worshipers of Kali, by default, they're going to keep getting it wrong. They're going to keep misinterpreting things. And that's why I don't want deities such as Kali or ideals such as Kali and ideals such as Brahm to ever be tainted by what had happened later on by those who took those names.